Hey everyone, it's me HawkeyeG, and I'm here with another video for you. This time I'm covering some quick campaign tips for the Karak Kadrin faction of the Dwarfs race in Total War Warhammer 3. The idea is to hit what I think are some of the main pointers that will help get you through a campaign without getting too deep into the details, so that you know what to look for or focus on. The Karak Kadrin faction has a pretty decent focus on Slayer units, and has a pretty tough starting location too, with enemies that will definitely outpace you. But I still think that it's a pretty fun campaign, and it's pretty manageable if you're familiar with dwarves, so it's still not too difficult to overcome. Now with that being said, let's get started. So the first tip I want to provide is that I think you should replace the Slayer Shrine. You'll start the game with the Slayer Shrine in your main province, and I usually use it to recruit some Slayers as I move through, because you don't really have any other options. And as much as I wish I could recommend it for the sake of a flavorful campaign, I really can't. On normal or hard difficulties, it would definitely still be alright, but even in the early game, I don't think it's worth keeping. Instead, you're better off switching over to a barracks to start, so you can get dwarf warriors and quarrelers right off the bat. Then when you get the chance to put the barracks in your third settlement, you want to switch into the guild workshops in your main province, so you can get access to those units as well. As much as I want Slayers to be awesome for this faction, they really can't carry things alone. You've got some good bonuses to them, but even with, upkeep reduction traits, it's still tough to, they can perform well against early game units, but they just don't synergize well with the roster if you have an overwhelming number of Slayers. Now for tip number 2, if you do take Slayers, and I think you should take some, don't forget the unique skills that Ungrim has. With a pretty minimal skill point investment, you can make Slayers go a long way for your main army, and I do usually start my campaigns by putting a decent amount into his army in the first place. 1 point into Grimnir's Heir gives you 4 melee attack. He also has his innate trait, which gives them 5 melee attack. His Deathblow tree doesn't require any levels to unlock these unique skills, and we can get 2 skills that buff Ungrim so that we know that they'll last through the game even if we have no Slayers, but that also allows you to get casualty replenishment for Slayers at a significant rate. This is a big boost. Further on, when you get to level 12, you can unlock this Slayer tree, and we've got 2 pretty significant bonuses for Slayers here as well. You can really easily stack their melee attack to very high levels and get good casualty replenishment on them without having to invest very many points into the skill trees, and still get a lot of bonuses for Ungrim himself along the way. Now tip number 3 is to talk about the specialty units, and this includes Irondrakes and Slayers. So I've already mentioned the Slayer Shrine a couple of times, and touched on Quarrelers. I haven't touched on anything from the Siege Workshop, however. I think Thunderers and Irondrakes are also very important units in this campaign. You're going to have some Slayers. You're going to want some Slayers. They're going to be very good, especially if you've also got a follower that's going to reduce the upkeep for those Slayers. You can get their cost down pretty decently. However, you're going to be fighting greenskins, and then eventually the vampire counts, and Slayers just will not do the job against all the types of enemies you'll be facing, or at least that is to say, they won't be the most efficient. Instead, you really want to make sure you get some Irondrakes. These will absolutely shred a lot of the infantry units you'll see from the greenskins and the vampire counts. You also want to bring as many Thunderers as you can, either with what you can afford or what you have room for in your army, as these will help deal with some of the flanking issues. The Slayers will be able to deal damage on the front lines, and more importantly, deal with any of their monstrous units, whether they're flanking or hitting your front lines, but the Thunderers will kind of help. They're really there to take out any of the armored targets. They're kind of that middle ground where they could take out cavalry on the flanks. They can try to target down some heroes late in the game without doing a lot of friendly fire or taking much damage themselves. So keep these kinds of specialty units in mind. I don't think Slayers are bad for the campaign, but it's important to bring units like Irondrakes and Thunderers as well, because those will help fill the remaining niches that you need to cover. Now my tip number 4 is to be patient when you're fighting Azhag here in the north. On my campaigns on Legendary Very Hard, I found it very common for Azhag to get ahead of me and end up invading. Just like any good dwarf, you want to play the long game and be patient. It's okay to lose a settlement or 2 if you win the war in the long run. In this particular campaign, I was still on my way back from this first province in the south when Azhag started attacking me. He brought a Wog army, and he had a second regular army, and he attacked Nashrak's lair and took it from me. but because I took some good fights, I had walls built, I played defensively, and escaped with my main army to rebuild it, to be able to come back, fight him a second time, overwhelm him. And when you can kind of force the greenskins to come and fight you at a head like that, it's actually really easy to turn momentum in your favor. To follow up on that tip, remember that in this campaign, you're starting at a disadvantage. With Azhag, I'd expect you to lose a settlement or two before turning things around, perhaps not with the rest of the opponents you're facing here, but I think it's important to recognize you'll be playing from behind for most of this campaign with the enemies that you're facing. Azhag has a 3 settlement province with a gold mine in it. Vlad is probably going to end up with 2 provinces and also has a gold mine. And Grimgor often confederates the Badland greenskins and just has a giant swath of territory. This means you have to be sure to take time to prepare for the next battle. Don't rush in under-equipped. Make sure that you get these specialty units in your army, that you have a good ratio of units, that you have upgraded your troops to higher quality if you can do that, or recruited additional troops to defend your borders. Wait until your walls are built if you need to do that, because you can't spread your troops everywhere. When you do have the opportunity, it's important to take that opportunity and move quickly to secure victories and advantages, whether that's moving in at the start of the very game to the south and taking Grand Peak, which should be done quickly. Once you beat Azhag in a couple of fights, you need to take this province over quickly before the vampires or Grimgor come after you, but you don't want to rush into it just because it needs to get done, or else you'll end up taking too much damage along the way, or you'll just put yourself in a bad position and things will end up taking longer than they need to. Now, tip number 5 is to keep Thorgrim alive. You can see here in this current campaign, I've managed to confederate him, which is kind of nice. Whether we're going to hold on to his territory in the next 20 turns or so, questionable. And while I haven't had much trouble with keeping Thorgrim alive myself, I do think it's important to have Thorgrim stay alive and be successful. You might need to help him fight Skarsnik in the beginning of the game. Or you might get attacked from Skarsnik and just be able to provide value in surviving those attacks so that Thorgrim can be successful in his own campaign, defeat Skarsnik, and gain momentum. Thorgrim is a useful trade partner, and not so much a valuable ally as he is a great meat shield. Eventually, all of these various Greenskin and Skaven forces in the south will begin to pressure that region. You want Thorgrim to be taking the brunt of those attacks, and you want him to be healthy and prepared enough to survive them. Otherwise, if these enemies in the south break his guard too easily, it's very likely you'll be the next target. Tip number 6 here is to wipe out the vampire counts in the west before you decide to go south or east. While the territories for the vampires have is unpleasant for you, it's not exactly ideal. It's still very easy to take and hold. It's very easy to profit from. We've got 4 different settlements with unique resources available in them, and you could even trade away one of these provinces, or at least some of these spare settlements, to the Empire to be able to make friends with them more easily and give them more power so that they can focus on fighting the threats from the north like the Skaven and the Chaos, who will eventually be coming and targeting you as well. It's likely that Grimgor will be attacking you from the east. It's likely Thorgrim will be in a bad position in the south, but I still think it's most important to take out the vampires to the west. It just will put you in a much more stable position, kind of eliminates this threat that has some of the best access to your territory, that can attack you on multiple flanks very easily. We can see here, I could lose this settlement to Grimgor, I could back this army off, and it doesn't even matter. But even if I want to fight here, this gives me a really nice single choke point to funnel all of the greenskin troops into. Similarly, in the south, right now I just have Mount Gunbad. I'm more than willing to abandon these territories that I got from Thorgrim, because then it means everybody's going to have to run up the mountains through here, or maybe through the pass over by Karak Kadrin. But in general, this isn't true of the vampires. If you want to hold Zufbar, or even if they're holding Zufbar, they can attack you here in the south at Grand Peak. To be able to run there from Karak Kadrin is a long stretch. They can also run across the river and attack Karak Raziak. So you can see from really like one territory, they essentially have access to 3 separate provinces of yours. It's not true for anybody else, so I think that it's a good idea to take them out because they're going to leave you the most vulnerable. Now, with that being said, I believe I've covered everything I wanted to for this guide. I found these tips really useful in my campaigns as Ungrim, and I hope they serve you well in your own campaigns. This is really a campaign that shows the power of the fundamental units of the Dwarves. Even though you're a Slayer specialist, you still end up bringing Dwarf Warriors and Quarrelers if you want to be truly successful. It also shows how the selection of the right specialty units can really bring your armies to the next level. Having a good balance of those kinds of units that take out different threats and specialize will really allow you to win fights and overcome enemies who are putting you at a disadvantage because of their size. It also really shows how important it is to recognize the ebb and flow of military strength and movements. Failing to capitalize on an opening in this campaign is even worse than suffering other kinds of setbacks. Rushing headfirst into a battle you aren't prepared for is just going to prolong things further than you already want. So if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe so you can keep up with future content from me. If you have any questions about this campaign or others, please leave them in the comments section below, and don't forget to share your own tips about how you've handled your own Karak Kadrin campaigns. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.